Spoken
Hi
Label.
guys, Andy N again, on tour again for Spoken Label. This is a record today because we're at Queenie's Cafe now. Anybody knows where I live? It's Denton. Queenie's Cafe is in Denton. So this is the most local writer I've ever met. It's been fantastic. And I've got extra help today with me, Amanda, haven't I?
Yeah.
And who's Amanda?
Your partner.
Yeah.
I hope.
Now, gentleman we've got with us today, David Dalgleish. I'll let Dave introduce himself in a second. I got talking to you, Dave, didn't I, back in the last year?
Yeah.
Now, you met two mutual friends at Spoken Label, Gordon Zoner and Eve Nortley, and they referred you over to me, didn't they? So,
They did.
As they do. Probably they found out where you lived and where I lived. And I think they were after you to get me to point you in that direction of poetry nights, weren't they? Because they haven't. I know
That's
them.
right, yeah.
And we've not actually got into that yet. We've never got round to it.
No.
The three of us have been chatting all the time, so we'll come on to that afterwards.
Sure.
Because I know in your case, Dave, you're originally from the Denton area, aren't you? So,
Yeah.
And you want to tell everybody who you are?
Yeah.
Basically, where you come from then, and where all your creative stuff starts from. We'll take it from there.
Okay. I'm a Dentonian, born and bred, and as is a few generations previous. I would describe myself as someone who is originally a researcher. My background is in criminology, so a lot of the work that I've done in the past has been around criminal justice. But through doing that work, I got to start to work with young people and communities, and through that work, I started to look at two issues in particular: tackling prejudice in the criminal justice system and more generally, and also using poetry, rap music, and other ways to break the ice and get through to some young people who didn't necessarily have much in common with someone who come from Denton.
Yeah, because I said, I know you've done a lot of travelling, haven't you? So you've lived in several areas, haven't you, over the time? So, and I know you lived in London for quite a while at one point as well, didn't you? So, and you were telling me before your writing originally came from doing icebreakers, wasn't it, in teaching classes, wasn't it, back in 2002?
Yeah, basically what happened was I was working on a community project with some young people that was trying to improve the relationship between young people and the police and criminal justice sort of service deliverers, for want of a better word, in areas across London, some of the high gun crime hotspots at the time. And I was evaluating that project, but then some teachers weren't able to attend. And they needed someone to talk to issues around stop and search and some of the disparities in the criminal justice system around mainly class and race. And I did that, and one of the ways that I was able to sort of give people an understanding is use certain music that I grew up listening to, which is in particular hip-hop music, but also some rock music as well.
Cool.
Which spoke to some of those issues, and use that as a launch pad really to get them to discuss the contents of the music as a way to going into stop and search. What do you think about? So, for example, there's a song. Rather than the stereotypical songs by NWA, which we all know, went down the main source friendly game of baseball route, which is about police brutality, as a way to get them to open up and talk about their experiences.
Yeah, you've just done a more subtle way of approaching it, really, haven't you?
Yeah, and also I've got to remember the fact that, even though I went to college in quite a so-called high crime area in Manchester, even though my friends lived in areas that were associated with things like stop and search and that, I'd never had anything like that apart from being pulled over while I was in a car. I've never been stopped and searched for drugs or a weapon or anything like that. And I was there, this person with an MA in criminology, teaching these young people who live that reality on a daily basis. And I had to sort of check myself and try to put myself in other people's shoes rather than come in and tell people who experience something on a daily basis what something is like, because I don't know. And I guess from doing that work, I learned more from them than they learned from me. And it also gave me inspiration to write poems. So I wrote a song called 31 Days Later in Belgravia, which was basically looking at the fact that there was a lot of Class A cocaine use in areas like Belgravia and in the city of London.
Wow. Yeah, of course.
But the police didn't necessarily scrutinise some of those people. I mean, that song is on YouTube for people if they want to check it out. 31
We'll
days later,
links
David
later on
Dalgleish.
with that, yeah. We're looking at that. We're going to look at that one, aren't we? So, yeah.
And the sort of line that I said was Stockwell Park's in prison, Hyde Park gets a caution.
It's a good line. Yeah, straight away. So, I know obviously you told me off mic before you do. I know you do music as well as poetry, don't you?
Yeah.
So where did your music come from then?
Well, two strands. I was sort of a failed drummer at university. So I've still got a drum kit in storage somewhere. But when I started to do like poetry more seriously and got encouraged by a friend of mine I went to university with who's from Leamington, shout out Pedro Genco, was he produced the first track that I did, which was an a cappella that I sent to him, and then he put beats to it. Then he sent me a couple of beats and I did lyrics to that. So I was in a band with him as like a Bez character at first at university. Having a bit of a dance, and there was a drummer, and then that drummer sold his drumming kit to me, and I tried to play the drums, and I got to a pretty poor standard, and then realised that I was really just masking the fact that I wanted to be a vocalist and a poet and I guess a rapper.
Oh, fair play. Who's your favourite rapper then? Have you got anyone that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I would say for the sort of content that I do, Public Enemy. I'd say for people that sort of first sort of got me into hip hop would be De La Soul. And
classics, yeah.
I would say that my favourite band, pound for pound, is one of their label mates, A Tribe Called Quest.
Oh god, yeah. And
I think Q-Tip's an amazing producer. And
cool. Did you get into rap music when you were very young then, did you? Or was it?
Yeah. Basically, I got like a Now That's What I Call Music.
Oh, do you remember that, man?
Yeah, and like it was usually a double album.
Yeah.
And side 3 was always like dance and hip hop, so it would be like Technotronic, Eric B and Rakim, those sorts of artists. And it was really, I think, Eric B and Rakim's Paid in Full. But then I think the song I Know by De La Soul was a love song when I first got to senior school, and it's when I sort of first had like a proper girlfriend and first kiss and all that, and that song meant a lot. So it's through that way, really. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! It shows you when you're growing up in school. Sometimes like different music listen to each other.
Yeah.
It's like I've not told you this yet. Everyone knows Amanda. She knows I've been with her for years. But when I was at school, I used to listen to Scottish bagpipe music, and country and western in the 80s.
Yeah. That wasn't very popular.
It was very unpopular. Mostly that's all my dad was listening to be going through, and my mum was playing Grease soundtracks all the time. So I knew all them, but not all the 80s stuff. It's like shows, didn't it, when you're 80s stuff. What were you listening to at school, Amanda?
Oh, I can't remember now. I wasn't into all the stuff that everyone else was, so I was like the strange kid.
You like Bon Jovi, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I did. I like Bon Jovi. Yeah. I fell out with one of my friends because we were arguing over who were going to get John Bon Jovi, as if either of us had a chance.
So whenever you do something, when you look at school, you look back, don't you?
Yeah.
Sometimes some music when you're younger, it sticks with you when you get older, so you move away from it, don't you?
Yeah, and I think that like that particular time, I was really lucky to go to at secondary school between 1987 and 1992 in Manchester.
Yeah.
And for music, what better time to go to school than that? So you had like Stone Roses, Happy Mondays, and Spiral Carpets.
That old blue straight out.
A guy called Gerald, all the 808 State.
I met him a few times. The Voodoo Ray. Great guy. He's still active as well, isn't he? One way or another.
Yeah.
Well, this is something he's very recently. So.
Yeah, and there's a person who worked with him who's a producer called Annie Fakinola, who's also part of a sort of hip-hop jazz called Chapter and Verse.
Oh, yeah.
So he worked on that album, and he's
got one of their albums, I might have two of them.
His partner is a councillor in Trafford Borough, Labour councillor. Yeah.
Shows you different it is, like. I grew up by saying, man, I'm trying to build hip-hop roots in. I used to listen to a guy called MC Buzzspeed, remember?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
And he sang on my job when I worked at the job centre this spring. He was a great guy, actually.
He was a good guy, and also, at that time, I would say that if I had to pin my loyalties to a particular group or act from Manchester hip hop wise, it'd be Ruthless Rap Assassins, who were his contemporaries.
Kermit, you know.
Yeah, who then went on to do Black Grape. And
yeah, I was just. Do you remember Black Grape? Yeah.
I've heard them,
Yeah, very. I've got a Sean Ryder story actually. We're going off market.
No.
I've got two. One I can't repeat in the mic.
Yeah.
But the other one was I went down. Do you ever been to Final Exchange in Manchester?
Yeah.
I was in there once and some guy comes in with a hoodie, mumbles, "Can I ask me the Black Grape CD in the window?" And it was $1.99 and the guy behind the counter says to me, "You do know who that was, don't you?" And I said, "No, I don't." I stood right behind him. It was Sean Ryder. He came in, bought his own CD for $1.99 out the window.
I was really lucky actually mentioning Black Grape that when I went to Cardiff.
I've heard them down in Undistributed.
Well, when I went
the
to,
first album.
I'll be honest, I wasn't that much aware of them. And then I went to uni, and they were one of the first bands who played in like our freshers fortnight and that. And I went in to watch the sound check to see if I could see like Sean or Bez or anyone or Kermit. And one of their roadies was someone who knew my friend's cousin from Russia.
Oh,
so me and 5 friends got to see that concert for nothing.
Oh, fantastic.
So always brings a smile when I think of Black Grape.
Does bring a lot of memories back, it does. I used to go when I was a lot younger. I used to go to one or two of the pubs in Cholton.
Yeah.
And Manny was been there regular and John Squires and...
That's right, yeah.
I've got the drummer.
Rennie.
Alan
Rennie, yeah.
Never met Ian Brown. Never met him.
He's lived in Denton, Rennie, the drummer.
Yeah, I believe so. He's quite his local lad. He used to play the Witchwood a lot with one of his band after he's left the Roses.
And the bass guitarist from Spiral Carpets used to live in Denton as well.
Yeah. It's a big local links on that. I knew about that. So most of the Carpets are Oldham based more now.
Denton is more renowned for Mick Hucknall, but I can't say I'm that much familiar with his work.
You remember? Everyone's wondering the mic. Amanda's just shaking her head, shyly and going, why are we bringing Mick Hucknall into this conversation?
It's not fair. People are unfair to Mick, and also I just want to say that my auntie said no to him when he asked her for a kiss at St John Fisher's Disco in the 70s. and she certainly missed out on a fortune there, I guess. So
yes, I think she probably did. Probably kicking herself over that one. Now, obviously, back into yourself and Dave, obviously.
Sure.
Obviously, because we could all talk about music all day long, the three of us here. Now, I know you've shown me your book before.
That's right.
It came out in 2010, was it?
That's right, yes.
Where does racism come from? Now, because a couple of things to talk about is obviously, first of all, is I know we've got a reissue of the book coming out imminently, which we're going to come on to in a minute.
Sure.
But now, anyone seen the book we've got a copy of here? This is the original version.
That's right.
It's a great looking book in landscape,
which
is very unusual in shape for it.
Yeah.
Why did you do it landscape?
Couple of reasons. One is because I use quite a lot of visuals in the book, so it's people. Not a lot of. The book is mainly for people who don't know about this stuff to teach about it. So whether that would be community leaders or it would be teachers, and it can be applied right across the national curriculum. And if it's just type, I don't think that sort of target audience of young people would really be able to take that much in. But if they can see who these people are, who are often quite famous people, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, the historian Arnold Toynbee, they, unless you have something to actually look at and be able to say, oh, who's that guy? Oh, I recognise him from TV, or I recognise him from that book, or I recognise him in that book that we did in sociology or history or geography or whatever.
Of course, yeah.
So I just did the landscape thing, one, because of the space it afforded me, because a portrait might be a little bit squashed in terms of the images that I use, and secondly also because I pay tribute to people that did work before me, and a lot of the sort of seminal works that were done by the Institute of Race Relations, Runnymede Trust, they tended to be very similar.
No, I get you now. That's where you did it.
Landscape, and obviously because they also were using images to back up what they were saying.
How long did it take you to do the original book then? Was it quite a long, drawn-out process, that book?
I'd say it took me 5 years in total. Bear in mind that I had a full-time job at the time, I was doing this as I would be now. So that was a case of going to the British Library, going to various different libraries, university libraries, doing that research. Some of those books that I'm quoting from were originally written in some cases Arabic, in some cases French or German, and I was then having to either rely on people who spoke those languages to give me a translation from the books written in their original language, because I'm always big on that. And also I had to then source images, make sure they were copyright free, and basically do the design of the book, and then launch it, market it, organise a book launch, etc. And I would say that it was, in a nutshell, research about 3.5 years, writing and polishing it off about 1.5 years.
How did you find it with the marketing at the time? 10 years ago this year, wasn't it, when it came out?
I would say that I was a bit naive and not that very good at marketing. I wasn't in a weird position for someone who self-published and stuff. Is I'm not someone who loves to sort of like broadcast what I do. So a lot of the work that I've done around like anti-racism or countering violent extremism and stuff like that, it's not necessarily going to be that well publicised, because
it's not going to one you see in the top share, probably in the main marketing thing at Waterstones.
But also like a lot of really good work that's being done around criminal justice and addressing prejudice and trying to build communities. Quite often, unless they get lucky enough to partner in with an academic who's doing some research and stuff like that, quite often that will go under the radar, and we will see stuff which is done on TV, which is quite often done in a way for entertainment rather than social progress.
Yeah, no, I get completely brilliant. Now, I know obviously now you've got the book coming out, haven't you? Is it a reissue or a second?
No, it's an updated version.
Updated version. What's made you come back to do an updated version 10 years later then?
Looking back on the previous decade, I think that I'll be honest, I think that I failed in many respects first time round. I wasn't brave enough to leave my full-time job and dedicate enough time to doing the book full-time. I wasn't as aware of how to engage on some of the issues as I am now, but also I feel that the current political climate, whether it's in the US, UK or on the continent, it's needed now as much as it has been in any time before. I've seen a lot of things, whether we strictly look at football alone and forget politics and all that stuff, you can see some quite clear evidence from 2010 to 2020 of racist incidents, not just against fans and stuff like that and different countries falling out with each other, but some quite clear returns to what we might have called those bad old days of monkey chants, of people throwing fruit and as someone who's partly Italian, I've got a unique perspective of seeing what happens in Italy and England. And quite often England is good at pointing fingers at Italy, but it perhaps needs to get its own house in order. And I think that starts at home. And one of the things I look to do is to reach out to clubs in Greater Manchester to work with them and any of their players or staff who want to do that.
No, you've definitely got the ideas right. I think they say sometimes you're younger, sometimes you need that experience to realise where you've gone wrong sometimes. Now, I'm going to ask Amanda about this next question, because what do you think of my point there, Amanda? You're right, sometimes you first get going, you need the experience sometimes, don't you, to realise what you've done wrong with some things.
Oh yeah, if I look back at all my stuff, I can see everything I've done wrong, which is a lot.
No, but I think you learn, don't you, everything you do. I tend to always look at life as a journey, really, because I'm a massive Scott Walker fan of music.
Right.
And I admire him. They started off as a ballader in the 60s, and by the end of it, we did extreme metal. Years. Like, everything went from a progressive A to B to C. Some of them might massive jump to get D to E and stuff, but there's a balance in everything you do, and that's why I see what you're getting at with that straight away, Dave. Now, obviously, I know in relation to your poetry and stuff. Now, tell us about what made you actually want to go and read your poetry out at back in the last year in Switch.
I'm not sure. I think we mentioned this before we recorded, but this is off mic. For the record, I'm happy to say that I had a number of health issues between 2014 and 2017. Some related to my mental well-being. I had a heart attack, had a minor stroke. I think my body or Mother Nature or whoever was trying to tell me, David, you need to pull your finger out. So since last year, I wouldn't say straight after the stroke, I really started to work on myself and start to do things which brought me enjoyment and got a lot of things off my chest. And I thought, if I haven't got the courage to stand up in front of people and say what I believe through my poetry, then I'm doing myself a disservice as much as anyone else.
You do it. Whenever you're doing poetry, it's a great skill. In fact, not just the content you're telling people.
Yeah.
It's the fact it's public addressing.
Yeah.
And when you write, sometimes I think you learn a lot about that if you're doing the public addressing. Now, am I alright if I mention the story about you, Amanda?
Yeah.
When I first met Amanda, before we came to start dating, we both co-run with our friend Steve now, a night strep called Spoken Speakeasy, which is like an open mic based night for spoken word. And what were you like first time you went there, Amanda?
My hands were shaking.
Yeah.
Rather nervous she was. But you find like it's last year, Dave, for example, shows you how you can do if you keep doing this sort of thing. Amanda's running a magazine now, and we're going to talk about that later anyway, because I want to speak to you about that. But called Printed Words, and we did a festival last year with Amanda arranged it at the festival in Manchester. And basically with that was I ended up hosting in front of a couple hundred people a full festival. A show for us about an hour long, and you've never done out loud before, have you?
It's the first time. I didn't even expect them to say yeah, but they were looking for like acts and performers and stuff. So I thought I'll put my magazine through and get people that have been published in the magazine to do it, and they'll probably say no. And then they said yes, and I thought, oh no, now I've got to sort it out and actually ask all these people in the village and everything.
We do like anything like the point that David, like I said, is it's makes you happy being creative.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities everywhere you're going. We're in a large city, aren't we?
Yeah.
To branch out in different directions. I get you completely with that.
Well, it's quite funny. There's a couple of things really. I mean, I was just thinking back in terms of what you were saying, and a few lines from one of my poems came to mind.
Oh yeah.
And how I'd sort of like written this poem, and what I was saying was really about how I felt that after I'd had the heart attack, I'd kidded myself that I was on the right track, but I wasn't. I was kidding myself, and I wasn't really addressing some of the issues around the mental health and some of the physical health. And then I wrote this poem about this and got it off my chest.
Oh,
and I said,
we'll get you to do that second half as if you
well, just a couple of lines on that was
please.
It was just to sum up what an answer to your question, which is I wrote a poem of an artist. It's how I deal to impart this. Sooner or later, put pen to paper, and pain turns into catharsis.
Brilliant.
And when I wrote that line, I was like, I think I actually need to step up and let people know, whether it was continuing to doing it within an educational setting, but also just generally what I felt about history, politics, psychology, sociology. And my sort of aim is to do like a kind of 5 series of either like EPs or poetry books where we look at, and I've got to give David Cameron the credit for this.
Oh, not many people give him credit, unfortunately. That's not talking politics.
No, but it's he came up with this phrase, Broken Britain, and I've changed it to Broken Britons, which is what I've seen in my experiences, whether it's with the welfare system, with people with disabilities, and that includes veterans who are having to deal with a pay cut and a pay freeze, and all these different situations where we have so what I wanted to do was like a psychohistory of Broken Britons, a sociology of Broken Britons, a criminology of Broken Britons.
Oh wow.
And then look at the repair of Broken Britons and the legacy of Broken Britons, and move from what I would do.
With poetry, this or
yeah.
It's really interesting.
But also, a lot of the poetry is based on fact, or is actually just using facts from history and putting them into a poem.
Cool.
Whether it's about what I see with some of the way rights and freedoms are being taken away, or whether it's how I see those disparities. And even if you take race out of the equation and you look at the class dynamic of certain people who take Class A's from wealthy communities get punished less, even though they've got more in terms of amount and the seriousness of that drug than, say, a young person would in Denton. So, for example, I referred to a particular family of the Tetra Pak packaging company. The heir to that, Hans Rowden, and his wife were major heroin and cocaine abusers, and they took quite a lot of drugs into the US Embassy and were caught. They received a caution for that. In contrast, a mate of mine, in this context, a white working class dude from the Lisson Green estate, which sort of Edgware roadway, he got caught on his way home having a bit of a leftover joint, and he got the same punishment. And why would someone who's having a bit of a leftover joint get the same punishment as someone who's got over 50 grams of heroin and cocaine? And if we look at the class dynamics and the access to justice, money, power, privilege and access are the things. And then I turn that into a song 31 days later in Belgravia. And that is, I mention how Stockwell Park's in prison, Hyde Park gets a caution. You can Mancunianise that to Alexandra Park's in prison, Lime Park gets a caution. Just to say that if you are living in somewhere like Disley or Belgravia, you're much less likely to suffer the same fate in the criminal justice system for possession of more serious drugs than you are a young person on a council estate or traditional working class area.
Fantastic. So, certainly you've answered my next question. It was going to be, what's next for your writing wise? Well, you've answered that quite pretty great there. Yeah. Now, would you want to start doing more post slots and readings everywhere? Or you're not sure yet for yourself?
Yeah, but if I can just go back to what's next writing wise. What I would also say is, just because I think it's important for people to be aware, I am at the moment working with people I know in Italy, in Rome and Milan, who are anti-racist, anti-fascist, and we are working on an Italian version of my digital book.
Oh, brilliant.
So I will be pushing the Italian football authorities in the same way that I would be wanting to work with football authorities here in football clubs.
Yeah, of course.
My family is origins in near Genoa, so the club that I identify and support in Italy is Sampdoria. Sampdorian African players for Sampdoria have experienced racial abuse this season.
Yeah,
so
I've heard quite a bit of that going around. So yeah, cool. Now, obviously, like I said before, so onto the previous question then. Do you see yourself wanting to perform your poetry more then? Or is that in an ideal world? Or
No, I am doing that. I'm signed up to do that.
Oh yeah, where do you fancy going then? Any ideas?
Well, Eve has asked me to do some poetry for some anti-racism events later this month.
Oh, the one in
Bolton and Ashton.
Bolton, yes, I know about the Bolton one.
Yeah,
I can't do that one unfortunately though. Where's the Ashton one she asked you to do?
Where the usual poetry thing is in Ashton that I've forgotten the name of. What I say, the station. Yeah.
Oh, station.
And that's on the 14th, and the one in Bolton's on the 15th. And then I'm also looking at various open mic nights in the northwest, whether they're like Stockport, Manchester.
We know a few, so we know a few. I can think of you should go to definitely. So,
and I'm also quite lucky that because of who I know from university and work, I know people who live like South Wales way, London way, so I've got options of combining going to see them with doing some open mics in those areas, just to get an idea of what people in different parts of the country are into or not into.
Good stuff. That's brilliant. So if people want to find out more about you, where are they best going?
Well, within the next week I'll be publishing a website. That website will be vermilionbee.co.uk, and I'll spell that VERMILIONBEE. So the colour vermilion and the little humble bee, symbol of Manchester. So vermilionbee.co.uk, and that's where people can find out about my poetry and music, the work that I do, and I've tended to talk a lot about criminal justice and anti-discrimination, anti-racism. A lot of my work is also about local history, regional history, social and economic history, mental health issues, but also really getting people to appreciate the natural habitats we have in the northwest. I worked with someone who is based in Preston, and we saw that we could do a historical trip where you would educate people, sort of like either a podcast or a YouTube video, where you could start up in the Forest of Bowland, and without ever having to touch any concrete, you can get to Denton via the different rivers in Lancashire, whether it's the Calder and the Ribble, the canals, the River Irwell, the Crowle and the Tong in Bolton.
Now, I know your Facebook picture's got a picture of Harthead Peak.
That's right, yeah.
And I've not been up there. I've been past it in the car.
Well, that is also where I took the picture for the image that I used for one of my songs, which was called Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark.
Oh. Do you remember that OMD? I was wondering, man's that young, she doesn't remember.
Well, it's a play on an 80s band who called Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. They did a song called Enola Gay that you may or may not have heard of. It's on top of the pops a lot. And also because the kestrel, for me, is very symbolic. I'm very into ancient Egypt. The peregrine falcon is the sign of Horus or Heru. The kestrel is from that family.
I've just noticed the time here, guys. Apologies to Dave in this one. It's going to be a part 2.
Okay.
Hang around, everybody. See you in a minute. Apologies, Dave.
No worries.
Spoken, mate. Hi, guys. Still here with Dave and Amanda. Right, Dave, back to you, mate. Sorry about that, mate. You talked about kestrels then, weren't you?
I was talking about a song that I wrote called Orchestral Manoeuvres in the Dark. And really, I wanted to write about the Northwest, but I also wanted to write about politics and current affairs. I was mentioning that very interested in ancient Egypt and Horus, Heru, the personification of a peregrine falcon. Falcons are very much related to the kestrels, and the hawks got great eyesight. Some of the fastest flight we know is by these birds, and we've got kestrels about 10 miles away. We could go and see them, and obviously there's the great film Kes, which I read when I was at school in English Lit.
I've seen the film.
Which is great. And Brian Glover's in it.
I love both of them. I love Ken Loach, mind you, sounds genius.
And before I became aware of that, it was Barry Hines, I think, wrote the book.
Yeah, it was Barry Hines who wrote the book.
I just really identified it.
Have you seen the pictures of the guy that played Kes in that now?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
he's not changed, has he?
No, he's not. It still looks very similar.
He said, "Man, have you seen the film itself? There's pictures of the lad with a mock-up of the actual kestrel on it. Are done for the other year. He's not changed. He's all the age that we all have, but he's didn't recognise him."
Well, what I tried to do is sort of incorporate our local area into the song, and think about politics. And I really tried to see that, that the YouTube and social media vocalists like Katie Hopkins and all these folks
anyway,
were really just
Katie Hopkins.
Well, what I was going to say is I wrote that song thinking about what her and her ilk do. So the song starts off talking about how these hungry fledglings need to be fed. It said these hungry fledglings need a rat to return to the nest with the red meat captured. And basically what I was saying is that red meat is basically anti-immigrant sentiment, or it could be in modern terms, it could be the way that they've targeted Meghan Markle, or it could be the way they've targeted certain politicians and not others. And then I tried to talk about how orchestral manoeuvres in the dark at Denton Golf Course and over Debdale Park.
Completely.
And then I say over Daisy Nook and the rest of the Medlock Valleys, picking on scraps in ginnels, you call them alleys.
Are these songs planned to be on your website? People interested, That, everybody, pay attention, they'll be on the website.
They'll be on the audio-visual page, so there'll be poetry and music. Then there's some photography, which I'm kind of using as a way to teach people about local history and things like that.
It's been fascinating today, because I've been living in Denton for a few years now. I don't know the area that well. And you don't know it at all, man, do you?
So I've been there a few months.
No, and the last thing is the thing that I said that is like one of my main hobbies and interests is growing fruit and veg. One, from a health point of view. Two, I would also say from a mental health point of view, and I can't thank Gardener's World and Monty Don and those people enough for teaching me how gardening, and also me going back to my experience of gardening, which is helping my grandmother pick strawberries when I was a kid, and doing what was done when I was young and helping her out. I now tend to concentrate on growing peas. I love eating raw peas.
I've got the thing, Amanda, didn't your dad used to do gardening? I imagine.
No, Helen's husband does.
Amanda's younger sister, Helen, her husband does it. What's gardening from then?
He doesn't grow food and stuff, he just does gardening. Well, he did gardening for money, he doesn't now. He works in a bank now.
And there's also I wasn't massively into the flower side of things until recently, and then I just started to read about how certain flowers have been used either A, with healing properties, or B, used as the basis for what then become medicines and we call pharmaceuticals.
I've heard that before.
So there's like calendula flowers, which is meant to be really good for things like skin rash.
So what do you have? Do you have all this grown in the house you live in, or do you have like a little
I've got a back. I used to have an allotment, but I had to give it up because of the stroke. So I now have what I call a kitchen garden rather than a kitchen garden. And I've got a small greenhouse, it's plastic, which I grow tomatoes, chilies, and peppers in, and aubergine. And then outside, I would say is about 3 foot by 6 foot of peas, broad beans, runner beans, climbers basically, because I've not got much space. But climbers can include things like pumpkins and squashes if you trail them right.
Right, I know that. I know great stuff. So, well, that's pretty well all the questions today for you, Dave. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we'll take a quick break and we'll get you to read out some stuff for us.
Okay.
Thanks again, Dave, and thank you, Amanda, for listening today. See you all soon, guys.
Spoken, mate.
Hi, guys. Right. Enough from me and Amanda. Straight over to Dave again, and he's going to read out a poem for us and a little extract from one of his book. Over to you, Dave.
Okay, well, I thought I would change tack a little bit and do a much more general programme that appealed to a universal audience. So I'll start to my poem, which is about something that is in everyone and around everyone, which is water.
Cool.
So, ice when I freeze in your coffees, your teas. The steam that takes the creases out of your chemise shirt. Add soap to remove dirt, or to a gun so you can just squirt. Should I say fire? Low, without a doubt. I'm in this extinguisher, I'm putting you out. I know that might sound very bold, but I'm misty-eyed and moody, some say hot and cold. And you can bathe and shower, take stock and devour. Floating ideas like snap, I've got the power. Please convert to hydroelectric dam before I flood things here and get hectic. Hard no filter and a whole lot cleaner when you add me to your Ribena. When I drop bombs, on impact they burst. I'm liquid, freestyle, and I'm quenching your thirst. So who do you think I am? Who do you want me to be? I'm H2O, I'm your favourite MC. A molecular compound, water falls over stones and rises to steam eventually.
Brilliant. What do you think, Amanda? You've got a great ear for rhythm there. That shows you've been a rapper, basically.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
I have got other songs which are about some of the topics that we've mentioned, and I'm happy to do them on future podcasts or talk to you about that.
Well, sort of, like I said, it's no problem with that, because you're so local to me.
Yeah.
Anyone's wondering where Dave lives. He lives about what? We reckon about...
Just address that.
No.
Someone might do a mission.
We both live near Crown Point in Denton,
Yes, it was when you told me exactly where you lived.
M34, the west side of the Tame.
Yeah, and I'm on the other side, about 10 minutes walk from there, literally, and I thought, oh, that's fantastic. I mean, having great fun. Right. Over to you, mate.
I'm just going to briefly finish off talking about a topic that's quite pressing at the moment. Last year, towards the end, Manchester United and Manchester City had a local derby, which Manchester United won at City's ground. What happened was that some Man United players were racially abused by a Manchester City fan.
Disgraceful that was.
And
I'm a City fan, unfortunately, as well.
And I'm a United fan.
I'm not proud of that.
And I would be a liar if I said that there weren't United fans who were like that. It just so happens that they weren't caught that day. So I know City fans who, look at things very differently to the way that fan did, as it sounds like you do. What I wanted to do is give your listeners an idea of why have we used these monkey chants. If you look at a monkey, you'll see that chimpanzee. Let's take a chimpanzee for example. It's got thin lips. It has different colour skin tones of chimpanzee. It can be quite dark. It can also be quite light. But it's got straight hair. It doesn't necessarily have curly hair. Many of the features that you could ascribe to a chimpanzee, you could ascribe as much to a white person as you could a black person, if not more. So I wanted to know, well, why have we gone down this route? So I found that the first references were around about the 14th century. You've got a Spanish writer who, at the time, is under Moorish rule, a guy called Arnau of Villanova. And he suggested that people in hot climates like Africa were in their form like apes. Now, given that we all descend from them, chances are we are going to. But then people who will be much more familiar to our listeners than Arno of Villanova, John Locke, when he's talking about people in his essay concerning human understanding in 1690, he's saying that people looked like monkeys. You've then got people in Germany around about the 18th century, when race is really being constructed in that sort of area, and saying that Africans resembled apes in those regions. Some suggested that African people mated with the monkeys in their area. So you have these ideas that sort of form like an avalanche or a snowball of public consciousness, where people have forgotten whether or how much this makes sense or not. And I must stress that racism in many respects is a nonsense, biologically at least. Racism definitely exists, but the science on whether races exist is a bit more pseudoscience than science. But you then have these writers who then are being involved in enslavement and then later colonialism, who are using this as a justification, alongside things like people being cursed or people not being as intelligent. But these sort of monkey chants are filtered down. Then you have things like human zoos in the sort of turn of the 20th century, people being used as sort of museum exhibits. But then even coming down into more recent times, you've got other biologists writing around about the time of Darwin who were pushing this as well. And what we then have as a consequence is we have footballers like John Barnes in the 1980s, like Clive Best in the 1960s, whether it's in the 60s, 70s, in 80s in particular, where monkey chants and throwing bananas were quite visible. Then we tended to have a backlash against that. But then, in the last 10 years, we've seen Michelle Obama and Barack Obama portrayed that way.
Yeah.
We've seen footballers in the Manchester Derby 2 months ago being portrayed that way by that fan. And I just wonder at what point people are going to think, why do we do this? And what's informed us? And really, when you actually look at it, you've got other people who like us are white, who could quite easily be compared to monkeys. Some even do it themselves, like Ian Brown, the Stone Roses singer, calls himself King Monkey.
Do you remember when he used to put films as a monkey?
Some people, rightly or wrongly, have compared footballers like Martin Keown or Gareth Bale to being slightly monkey-looking like. Yeah. So, it's basically something that we need to address, because at the end of the day, these are our communities, and we've got in particular in Denton has changed quite a lot since I left in 2000 to now, in terms of what Denton looks like demographically. But I would also say, for the record, before Dentonians express any negative views about that, please remember that if it wasn't for those communities, chances are many of our churches would have gone already. Many of our service sectors wouldn't be served. Our local hospital, Tameside Hospital, would be looking for more people to be working there. And I think people take a really what have immigrant communities done for us attitude, and it reminds me of that scene in Life of Brian where they say, what have the Romans done for us? What have immigrants done for us? Well, if you want to go back far enough, we've had an African leader of Britain, Septimus Severus, who was born in Mauritania. We saw what was done for us in the courts of some of our monarchs in the Tudor times. But then more recently we've seen Mary Seacole in the Crimea. So before you even get into sport and stereotypical things around dance and athletics and stuff like that, there's a real contribution to the fabric of this society, particularly in the northwest with the mill towns. And I was speaking to you earlier about how West Indian cricketers plied their trade in Lancashire, and also to internationals Kenny Benjamin and Malcolm Marshall, played for the local club to Denton Cricket Club.
I didn't know that. And it's ironic. I live. You say local to that club, and I never knew that.
And I think what is also part of the work that I do is trying to deal with that hidden history, that sort of helping young people or helping teachers or helping young people learn about these subjects by making it real to them. Places they can touch and feel, events in history where they can see how it shaped their city. So Manchester was shaped a lot by slavery, financially, but even within this book we've got someone called Charles White who was talking about black people's anatomy in a very negative way. Charles White was one of the founders of Manchester Royal Infirmary.
Yeah.
So sometimes these people were despicable when it came to issues of racism, but then they contributed to other parts of our fabric of society and stuff like that.
So it's fascinating.
So there's a really complex relationship sometimes of really nice people doing some really good bad things, or some really gifted people doing some really gifted things which have contributed to the city, but then there's been a sting in the tail with things like the way that they've treated poor people, women, etc.
No, it's a point. So if people want to get hold of the book then, when obviously after it gets reissued, which the podcast will be going live just after, where can they get it from?
It will be available on Amazon, but there will be a link from my website, as I said before, vermillionbee.co.uk. There'll be a specific page that deals with my books and publications, because I've also got some that I've done previously.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I worked for the Home Office and did publications on police reassurance, stop and search. I worked on the Lawrence Inquiry recommendations, basically. So
definitely, I'm looking forward to reading the copy you've passed on to me before. So,
but my more recent work is very different too. They are very dry academic reports.
Yeah.
This is much more a very interactive book that's as much for families as it is for schools and colleges and communities.
Well, thank you again for that today. It's been fascinating, David. Thank you, Amanda, for being here as always.
You're welcome. Thank you both.
Down the end, signing out. Thank you again, guys.
Spoken